Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the meeting. This is the April meeting of the Coastal Resources Commission. Before we get started, the State Government Ethics Act mandates that at the beginning of any meeting, the chair shall remind all the members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire as to whether any member knows of any conflict of interest or potential conflict with respect to matters to come before the commission. If any member knows of a conflict or potential conflict, please say so as the roll is called. Angela? Renee Cahoon. Present, no known conflicts. Neil Andrew.
Present, not aware of any conflicts.
Larry Baldwin.
Present, no known conflict.
D.R. Bryant.
Present, no known conflicts.
Bob Emery.
Present, no conflict.
Jordan Hennessy.
Present, no known conflict.
Robert Hyde.
Present, no conflict.
Sheila Holman.
Present, no known conflict.
Steve King.
Here, no known present or no known conflicts.
Lawrence Solder.
Present, no conflicts.
Steve Shuttleworth.
Present, no known conflicts.
Earl Smith.
Present, no known conflict.
Robbie Yates. That's 12, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mayor Smith and Manager Justin Whiteside for their hospitality and all the staff for hosting this meeting. We really appreciate the facility, and Justin, you went over and above getting the president of the community colleges to come shuttle everybody around yesterday. That was very nice. We had a great field trip yesterday to look at the groin that's out there, as well as the bags that we permitted back in November that are still being installed. A lot of interesting things going on out there. Quite a different scenario now as to when we made our last field trip out there to look at the terminal groin, or at the groin. A lot of dynamics have changed and are still continuing, and we look forward to seeing the progress as some of the nourishment projects come out, some of the dredging projects come out, and see how it fills in behind, and whether the summer season will also keep accelerating. The bags that we permitted that have been installed since November have shown signs of sand accretion. The bags were installed at the water's edge, basically almost in the water. And there's a huge amount of sand that's been developed, so that's a positive aspect. And we look forward to seeing how that continues on. If anybody would like to share any of their comments about the field trip yesterday, I would welcome those comments at this time. Seeing none, we will move on. First up is the approval of minutes from the February 26, 2026 meeting. Motion will be needed to approve those.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Appears to be unanimous. Deputy Secretary, we welcome your attendance this morning. We appreciate the divisions and departments' interest in coming to meetings, and we always welcome any comments or feedback from those meetings. So if you would like to come up and say anything, we would welcome you.
I'm just happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming. Tancred, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Good morning to members of the Commission, members of the Advisory Council that are here, visitors, staff, folks online. Good to have you this morning. Secretary Dello, I'll echo thanks to you for being here. Assistant Secretary, give you promotion. And then also echo the thanks to the town for hosting us here in Ocean Beach. Before I get into the staff's report, I'd like to make you all aware, make sure that everyone's aware of the recent passing of former CRC Commissioner, Coastal Engineer, State House Representative Rick Catlin. Rick served on the commission from 2016 to 2020. He did wonderful work for the coast in many capacities, and our condolences and gratitude go out to his family. Also, make a note that you'll see at your desks, you have new little pins, new camera, 1974. We just celebrated the 52nd anniversary of camera this past Saturday. So please wear those in good health and enjoy the gifts from Christy. So starting with regulatory updates, we're in the final stages of processing 2 applications for upland marina basins that meet last year's statutory changes under SL 2025-48. You may recall that this legislation amended CAMA to change the permitting process for upland marina basins, including wetland impacts that are allowed, dissolved oxygen thresholds and attainment, and bonding for necessary upgrades to meet those DO standards. Review of those applications is in the final stages, and staff will be issuing permit decisions very soon. And we have a number of other applications in various stages of pre-submission. DCM is holding a 2-day workshop for local permit officers for the central and southern districts on May 20th and 21st in Hamilton Beach State Park in Swansboro. These workshops will include formal presentations by DCM staff, other state agencies. We will include rule updates, hands-on training, the LPOs, and lots of discussion. LPO attendance at these workshops is part of the contract that we have with local governments under the Camel Minor Procurement Program. Staff in the Wilmington Regional Office spent some time with the Army Corps of Engineers on one of the dredge vessels recently during the Carolina Beach, Curry Beach nourishment project to learn more about their nourishment methodology. Now, we always appreciate that relationship with the Corps and their willingness to share and partner with us. Turning to planning and resiliency, we have not certified any land use plans since the last CRC meeting. The pre-application period is open for a little while longer for the Public Beach and Coastal Waterfront Access Grant Program. Pre-application materials are available on our website and are due April 24th. Please reach out to Rachel Love-Adrick or Mike Christenberry if you have any questions. In the Resilient Coastal Communities Program, the RCCP, communities participating in this round of planning and vulnerability and hosting public engagement events, with additional events planned throughout the spring and summer. For information on dates and locations, please speak with Mackenzie Todd or Keith Walden. The Camel Land Use Plan Resilience Pilot Project is underway, integrating RCCP resilience strategies directly into local land use plans. Elizabeth City, Pamlico County, and Hyde County are participating and have each held their first public meetings. RCCP staff will be present to provide technical support and gather community input. These pilot projects are scheduled to be completed in early 2027. Looking ahead at the RCCP, our available funds have been mostly depleted, and the RCCP team is pursuing additional funding to continue the program's reaching impact. They recently submitted a pre-proposal to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's National Coastal Resilience Fund, where we've received several grants in the past, requesting approximately $1.25 million to support another round of phases 1 and 2. This funding would prioritize smaller, lower capacity communities and emphasize nature-based solutions that strengthen both community resilience and ecological health. We expect to hear in late May whether we'll be invited to submit a full proposal. On the Coastal Reserve, spring student field trips to the Rachel Carson and Masonboro Island Reserve by the Island Explorer program are underway, and summer camps at the Rachel Carson Reserve will start in June in partnership with the North Carolina Maritime Museum. After receiving input from local advisory committees, the CRC, and the public, DEQ has classified all Coastal Reserve rules, which are 15A NCAC 070, as necessary. They're scheduled to be reviewed by the Rules Review Commission at its April 28th meeting under the periodic review and expiration of existing rules process. The Coastal Training Program will host a Living Shorelines workshop for Cape Fear realtors and a Living on a Barrier Island workshop for Brunswick County realtors in April and May, with presentations from regulatory staff. The next stop on the Discover the Reserve tour is scheduled for May 1st at Kitty Hawk Woods Reserve. You all should have received invitations, and I think some of you have already indicated your intention to attend. It will also highlight the division's public access program, the RCCP, and Division of Marine Fisheries Marine Patrol. Secretary Wilson will be in attendance, and we look forward to his participation as well. Public access improvements are in place in time at a couple of reserves for the spring. We have new paddle trails and existing trails were improved at Kidiock Woods, Masonboro Island, and Zeke's Island reserves. Local advisory committee meetings will be held for 5 of the reserve sites in May and June. The details will be posted on their website and shared via press release. Several interns will be working with the reserve in Beaufort and Wilmington this summer. We want to thank the Friends of the Reserve, the North Carolina Internship Program, and UNCW for their support and partnership on these internships. Students will work on a range of stewardship, research, and education projects. In staff news, the final field rep vacancy in Morehead City has been filled, and Heather, of course, is thrilled to have full staff. Josh Beal started on Monday, coming to us from the Division of Marine Fisheries in Morehead City. Josh holds a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and we're very excited to welcome him to the DCM family. We also want to congratulate Austin Turbot and his family, Austin, on the arrival of his baby boy, Hudson Rhodes Turbot, on March 21st. Up on a month.
Still no sleep.
I'm going to end with a couple pieces of great news. First, yesterday, the state accepted the transfer of the Topsail South End parcel from the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust. This is an exciting acquisition for the state of North Carolina, and we are eternally grateful to the Land Trust, an amazing group of donors and volunteers, and the town of Topsail Beach for their partnership to make this happen. Next, I'm extremely proud to let you know that 6 of DCM staff will be receiving Distinguished Employee Awards from DEQ at the end of April. DCM's recipients include our DOT permitting team, Kathy Brittingham, Lee Kennedy, and Stephen Lane, Morehead City Senior Field Rep Cara Guthrie, Coastal Training Program Coordinator Whitney Jenkins, and Buckridge Site Manager Woody Webster. Congratulations to all of these staff. Madam Chair, I'll add that these 6 awardees represent 12% of DCM staff. I think that's a testament to the excellence and professionalism that we have here at DCM. And if it were up to me, they'd all get awards.
Could those in the audience stand if any of them are here?
Don't believe
No, they're here today. They're out working
They're
today.
hard at work.
They are.
Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Tanker. It just follows up. We have a great staff. For those of you who may not be aware, they work really hard. And I'd like to thank all the members of the staff that helped set up this meeting, traveling around as we do and trying to make sure the logistics are taken care of, the work and prepping the rooms, although we also thank Mayor Smith and her staff again. This is a great facility to come to as well. But I'd like to thank all the staff for all the work that they do. Thank you very much. Bobby, good morning. I know you did not have a CRAC meeting, but do you have anything to add this morning?
No, man, we didn't have a meeting, so I have nothing to report out. I will say, we work to help you all. So as things come up, please include us, and we're glad to help you do the things that you do. And then I'll just, as a Dare County note, you've all read and seen and heard all the things that are going on in Buxton and houses falling and all the things we're doing there. We have a beach nourishment project that will start now the second week of May. So there's help on the way in Buxton, and so we should improve that area here pretty quickly. So that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the work that CRAC does. It's a great partnership that we have, and we look forward to the input that we get from y'all as well. Thank you. Commissioner Emery, thank you very much for the work that the Coastal Land Trust did on acquiring the point and the Topsail. What a great acquisition. And I know y'all worked very hard. Thank you for your
We were
leadership.
happy to get it, and happy to pass it on to the Division of Coastal Management.
Thank you so much. Next up is public comment. Does anyone has any public comment, please come forward to the podium and state your name. Angela, has anyone signed up? I know we're moving a little bit early. Mr. Please.
I signed up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jimmy Bell. I work with the Point OIB developer as well as with the HOA in trying to coordinate all the activities with the erosion damage, the sandbags, the variances, trying to get the neighborhood back to a complete status. So I would like to say, first of all, thank you to the commission. Thank you to the town. Thank you to your staff, the staff with the town. continue with the compliments because this group has been great to work with. I know you probably have some of your own reputations that some people feel like might be challenging, but y'all have been very good with us and working with us, and we do appreciate everything that y'all have done. We still would like to understand more about how the changes to the setback guidelines are going to impact not just this inlet, but all inlets in North Carolina, as well as the financial aspects. So I talked to Mr. Richardson a few minutes ago about how the financial impacts are going to be accounted for, so that we would understand what falls in the bucket to contribute to the financial impact as it's going to be stated in the upcoming rules and regulations. So if we might could get some help, and I could talk to Mr. Richardson and maybe get some more help with understanding that and the mathematics of how the setback line for the inlet hazard area became established, impacting so many homes on the east end of Ocean Isle Beach, where it's the most heavily impacted of all the inlets. So we would just like to understand a little bit more of that if we could get some feedback. So thank you for all your help.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. I'm sure Ken will be glad to share as much information as he has in that knowledgeable head of his.
Thank you.
He does a great job. Angela, is there anyone else? I know we're moving a little early this morning, so if anyone else comes in, we'll account for that shortly. Next up is Variance Winslow. Forgive me, I'll never be able to pronounce it. Calabash Pier Length. Good morning, Christy and Austin. And then I see Clark's in the room as well.
Yes.
Good morning.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm DEQ Assistant General Counsel Christine Goebel, here to present the Winslow Scambati variance for the Commission. We're going to start with the PowerPoint with our field rep, Austin Turbot, to walk you through it.
Thank you, Christy. Good morning, Austin, and congratulations again.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Austin Turbot. I'm the field rep for Western Brunswick County for DCM, here to do the presentation for the variance request for 9149 Schuyler Drive. As you can see here, the stars that are marked on the map are the location areas for the subject project area. This slide uses photos courtesy of Google. The top image is from Google Maps showing the project location within the Brunswick County area using that red star. The bottom photo is a satellite image of taken from Google Earth showing the proposed project location on the AIWW and its proximity within the North Carolina and South Carolina border. Oops.
So your notes are from.
Okay. My apologies, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay, as you can see, the star is within the project location. It is showing the P&A overlay. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. The image is courtesy of Esri and found on the Division of Marine Fisheries map. The proposed project location is denoted with a red star. the red hash lines would indicate that this portion of the AIWW is designated as a primary nursery area. And on this slide, these are staff images from April 2nd, 2026. Still giving me issues. Sorry about that, everybody. Back to this slide, unfortunately. This is an image courtesy of Google again, indicating the Army Corps of Engineers channel shown with the parallel black lines, which are kind of hard to see on the slide, and then the 80-foot federal channel setback with the parallel red lines. Again, the staff pictures from April 2nd. And then this is the work plat provided by the petitioner, showing that the distance of the, or to the 1/4 of the water body distance and the waterward end of the proposed docking facility, and the 1/3 water body width, and all three of which are measured from the average waterward edge of the marsh. This image is a close-up of the work plat with the water depths and shows the proposed docking facility extending to the edge of the U.S. Army Corps 80-foot federal channel setback. And the location of the 1/4 width of the water body is also shown along the water depths at a mean low water in the vicinity of the 1/4 of the water body and around the location of the proposed docking facility. This profile view of the work plat was provided by the petitioner and shows the normal high water line and normal low water line in relation to the docking facility. The work plat also notes the location of the 1/4 water body width. And these are the conditions of the variance request.
Thank you. Christine.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and review kind of the highlights of the stipulated facts, and then talk about staff's position, and then I'll invite Mr. Wright to come up and talk about petitioner's positions on the 4 criteria. So the petitioners are Joseph Winslow and his wife, Jacqueline Scambati. They have the property at 9149 Schuyler Drive in Calabash. They took title in 2022. It was titled through a related family trust. The site has an approximate shoreline length of 150 feet along that intercoastal waterway. Their property is located adjacent to the AIWW. The distance between the normal high water level at the site and the Corps' 80-foot setback line is approximately 420 feet. The site is approximately 0.9 miles east of the state line. The AIWW is approximately 590 feet from the waterward edges of the coastal wetlands on each side. And your rules dictate that's where the water body width is to be measured from. These waters are classified as SA, high quality waters, and it is a primary nursery area. It's also close to shellfish harvesting. The petitioner submitted a CAMA major permit application on or about July 3rd of last year to construct a 1-slip 480-foot pier with an 18 by 20 gazebo, an 18 by 38 boat lift. Of the 480-foot length, the first 78 feet would be landward of normal high water, the next 242 feet would be over coastal wetlands, and the final 160 feet over open water, extending up to the channel setback line. The depths in the vicinity of the authorized boat lift location, as seen in the application, were about 1.4 feet in depth to 2.1 feet. And in the proposed boat lift location, as proposed by petitioners, they would have approximately 2 to 2.1 normal low at the landward side of the boat lift pilings, and 2.8 at the waterward side of the boat lift pilings. I think as you saw in the pictures, the opposite shoreline in this case is an area owned by the state, and it is part of our Bird Island Coastal Reserve site. So there's unlikely to be any development on that side by piers. As you also saw in the photos, there are existing private piers located to the southwest and northeast of the property on Peakwood Drive and Schuyler Drive, some of which extend up to the core channel setback line. One of those was a variance that you all granted in 2020 to the Walters who live at 9269 Peakwood. And the variance was granted to come up to that quarter width, or past the quarter width to the pier head line. No, to the core setback line. The water body at the site is 590 feet, so the quarter distance would be 147.5 feet. The proposed docking facility would go to 160 feet, so it's approximately 20 feet beyond the quarter width and approximately 27% of the width of the water body. Your rules at 7H0208G3 state that pier length shall be limited in part by not extending more than 1/4 of the width of the natural water body. Your rules then go on to have a few exceptions written into that allow going out to 1/3 of the water body, but those don't apply in this case because there's not piers within 200 feet of this site. As part of the major permit process, this CAMA application was sent out for review and comment. DMF's comments are in your materials. They responded that while the depths are 2.1 and 2.8 currently, because the site is within a primary nursery area, if there were any future excavation to be proposed, DMF would be objecting to that. Shoaling is a common thing that takes place, and so this is DMF just on the front end saying they're going to object if that's a later request. In anticipation of the petitioner seeking a variance, the Corps in October of last year placed the petitioner's application on a soft withdrawal just to sort of wait and see what happens here before the Corps processes their complementary permit. No other state or federal agencies objected during the application review period, and also DCM received no comments from the adjacent riparian owners or other members of the public in connection with the application. In October of last year, DCM issued CAMA Major Permit 120-25. That's in your materials. It authorized the development that was proposed, but it limited it. It held it back to the, only extending out to the 1/4 width distance as required by your rules. The quarter width limitation was the only basis for permit denial. And so petitioners are seeking a variance from the quarter width rule from you to build the permitted pier to the 80-foot channel setback line of the Corps and not be held to the quarter width rule. Petitioners and staff agree on all 4 of the criteria, although staff don't agree with all of the arguments put forth by Mr. Wright, and so those differences are noted in our responses. But on the first factor, staff agrees that a strict application of the quarter width rule would result in unnecessary hardships for the petitioners, where strict compliance of the rule would result in water depths of approximately 2.1 feet mean low water. That could result in impacts to the substrate and shallow bottom habitat in a designated P&A. Staff agrees that strict application of the quarter width rule in this area is not essential to protect public navigation, in part due to the presence of the coastal reserve across the way. The second factor, do hardships result from conditions peculiar to petitioner's property? Staff agree that petitioner's hardship is a result from conditions peculiar to the property, the location on the AIWW across from the Bird Island Reserve, which is unlikely to be developed, reduces a need for strict application of the quarter width rule to protect public navigation. So strict application of the quarter width rule would result in petitioner's pier being located in a shallower P&A habitat that could lead to resource impacts. And ultimately, the core channel setback is going to be the thing that restrains petitioner's pier length if you grant the variance. and it is a relatively small extension past the quarter width distance. On the third factor, do petitioners cause their own hardships? Staff agree the hardships don't result from petitioners' actions where they seek to extend approximately 20 feet past the quarter width distance. And then finally, the fourth factor, staff agrees that the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the quarter width rule, where a proposed pier that's 20 feet longer than the quarter width avoids significant impacts to the shallow bottom P&A habitat. I'll invite Mr. Wright to come up. We'll see if he uses this whole 5 minutes, and then we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Christie. Good morning, Clark.
Good morning. I'm not gonna take very much time at all, which is unheard of for me.
Yes.
My name is Clark Wright. I'm with Davis Harper Wright, and I'm representing the petitioners here. And I would just emphasize the fourth factor, that there are no real harms from this proposal. One thing I would note is DMF's comment letter assumes that it will be extended to the setback line. If you read it carefully, you know, this is one of those situations where the permit application sought the full extent, and the permit is issued, cut it short based on the 1/4 width rule. But their memo from Derek Petweiler assumes the depths at the 1/4 width. I don't know that I need to say much more other than if y'all have any questions on any of the four factors, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Clark. Does anyone have any questions for either Clark or Christie this morning? Seeing no questions, thank you both for, and Clark, you
Now,
really.
I can't help it. I had one more comment.
Of course.
I came down with what the urgent care doc says might have been a case of RSV, which is why I was not here yesterday. I very much wanted to do the walking tour, but I don't think y'all wanted me to be walking and touring with you. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration. All right. As you notice that staff and petitioners agree on all four factors, but we'll vote on them one at a time. One, will strict application of the applicable development rules, standards, or orders issued by the commission cause petitioner unnecessary hardship? If so, the petitioner must identify the hardships. As you noted, both positions are yes. Entertain a motion on criteria 1.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion. We accept staff's position of yes on criteria 1.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Coleman and Baldwin. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Criteria 2, petitioner has or has not shown that hardships result from conditions peculiar to the petitioner's property, such as location, size, or topography. Is there a motion on criteria 2?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. We accept staff's position of yes on criteria 2.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Holman. Further discussion? Not, all in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Third criteria, petitioner has or has not shown that hardships did not result from actions taken by the petitioner. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. We accept staff's position of no on criteria 3.
Second by Commissioner King. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Unanimous again, Angela. On fourth criteria, petitioner has or has not shown that the variance request is consistent with the spirit, purpose, intent of the Commission's rules, standards, or orders, will secure public safety and welfare, and will preserve substantial justice.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. We accept staff's position of yes on criteria 4.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Baldwin. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. The variance is granted, and thank you to staff's work on this variance. Appreciate it. Moving right along. Proposed amendments to 15A NCAC 07H.0106, .0205, .0206, .0207, man-made ditches. Good morning, Daniel. We're back with the ditches.
Man-made ditches. Morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. This presentation today is in regards to the petition for rulemaking that you heard at your last meeting from Mr. Nelson Paul. petitioning for the new session law to put that session law into rule. This is just a picture for reference. So you received this petition from rulemaking from Nelson Paul last year requesting to incorporate the session laws 2025-48 into your rules. The session law made 3 statutory changes, including a new definition of man-made ditches, and that man-made ditches may not be designated as an AEC, and marshland as defined in dredge and fill law should not be included as a man-made ditch. So under your rules, 15A NCAC 7J0605 requires that the director give you a response in regards to that petition for rulemaking. You heard that response at your last meeting in February, and basically that response concluded that the proposed amendments are in conflict with the APA. Basically what Mr. Nelson Paul had done is he had taken the law itself verbatim and put it in the rule, and the APA does not allow that. But the response from the director also said that we should grant the petition, but we will come back to you with different rule amendments to adjust for the session law. So at your February 25 meeting, you did grant the petition for rulemaking, and you requested staff to bring back alternative amendments. And here are some of the amendments we propose. In this section, we basically are just going to reference the general statute definition and not put it verbatim into rule, just reference it from the general statute. And as you can see, the general statute's new definition is man-made ditches are means constructed, altered, or excavated features used to convey water, including but not limited to artificial ponds, culverts, canals, swales, storm channels, minor drainage features, roadside ditches. And for the purposes of this role, this is a very important part. The term altered does not include the alteration of natural shoreline, a natural stream, or a natural wetland. And the term excavated does not include submerged lands that have been dredged for the purpose of navigation. To also address the session law for the coastal wetlands rule, we just added that man-made ditches, again, are as defined in the general statute, are excluded from the coastal wetlands, AEC. For estuarine waters, we basically did the same thing and just added an except for man-made ditches as defined in the general statute. And then for the public trust, again, we exempted man-made ditches as defined by the general statute. So when it comes to making these calls in the field, they're going to be on case-by-case basis. You're going to have to do this in the field. Field staff's going to have to go out there. It might take several field staff and supervisors to go out there and make this determination. But one picture that I wanted to show here is one that kind of is kind of clear where we can make that line. And as you see on the right side of the road, that is a natural shoreline. It's within coastal wetlands, and so we were going to claim jurisdiction. But as soon as you pass over that road, even though those farm ditches might have coastal wetland characteristics, maybe even estuarine water characteristics, it's a man-made ditch, and we're not going to claim jurisdiction within those ditches. And with that, I will conclude. I do want to add that Mr. Nelson Paul did email me recently and said that he accepts these amendments, and he has no further comment.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Any questions for Daniel? Larry?
On the left side of the road there, I was glad you put that picture up there. I was just trying to envision how in the world you're going to do this.
Yeah.
But on the left side of the road, you still have jurisdiction over coastal wetlands,
No,
do not?
We do not. As the new rule amendments have in there, coastal wetlands are now going to be exempt from man-made ditches. So even if the field rep goes there and sees coastal wetlands growing in that man-made ditch, we have lost jurisdiction from this session law. But on the right side of the road, since it is a natural shoreline and it was cut through coastal wetlands, we will still have jurisdiction.
Neil?
What about in the bottom part of the picture in the left side of the road?
Where the that other creek
Yeah, looks like a road kind of separates a marsh
Yeah,
area or
in
something.
that situation, I believe that's gonna be cut through coastal wetlands, so we would still have jurisdiction.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bob?
So a big ditch out through the marsh.
Yeah.
Something you can drive a decent sized boat.
Like Banner Mesquite situation.
What's the status of a ditch like that?
If we were gonna claim jurisdiction, because it's gonna be connected to public trust waters.
Any other comments?
Basically, your mosquito ditches, stuff like that. Yeah, so.
All right, if there's no further questions,
Down there.
I'm sorry, this one, Jordan.
So, Mr. Paul had asked for, or did a petition for rulemaking last year, but then rescinded it. Is that right?
He did it one time, submit, and then he had requested declaratory ruling instead.
One of the two he withdrew, though, right?
That was a different
That wasn't this one.
action. This is a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So, do you have any inventory or idea how many ditches that might have been jurisdictional that are not? No. Okay.
All right, no further questions. A motion will be needed to approve the amendments to 07H.0106, .0205, .0206, and .207.
And the next step would be to go to public hearing. Correct.
Fiscal analysis. and then-
Fiscal, yeah. This is the first step.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Holman, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel. Next is proposed 15A NCAC 07H.2800 and amendments to 15A NCAC 07H.0309. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Move the slide up here. Okay. Good morning, members of the commission. I'm Jonathan Lucas with DCM's policy section, and I will be presenting a proposed new general permit for temporary weather monitoring structures. It's been previously recommended to you at the last meeting by the CRAC chairman, and this language has been developed by staff in response to that CRAC guidance. So I'm going to be first going over the background of what prompted this proposal in the first place. I'm then going to present to you the rule language itself for the general permit, followed by some amendments that we think would be helpful to the general ocean hazard rules to ensure alignment between the two rules. I'm then going to go over some of the existing statutory and rule guidance that we have, which provides information on how to go about adopting a new general permit. And then lastly, I'm going to go over a timeline. So for background, temporary weather monitoring structures are something that we've actually already been permitting as a division using the existing temporary structures general permit 07H 1900. The University of Florida so far has been the only permit applicant to utilize this, and they've been working in conjunction with the North Carolina Sea Grant. They use equipment that's called a Sentinel, which you can see the dimensions right there on the slide. There's been two issues one major issue that's been identified by CRAC in regarding to this permitting process. There's two aspects to it. But they both have to do with the adjacent riparian property owner notification process. So if you think about, so the purpose of this equipment is specifically to collect data on incoming hurricanes. So it's put on the beach at the landfall site of a hurricane. So considering that we only know the specific location of a hurricane of its arrival, say a few days before arrival, that does not allow enough time for the permitting process with the certified mail to get your standard riparian notification process done. So a solution to that, a workaround, would be then to apply early in the season, put all of your possible sites on one permit, and then knock out all of your notifications at one time. For example, the most recent permit we wrote for this, which was in July of last year, there was 18 sites down the coast. But then when you factor 1 to maybe even 3 neighbor notifications for each site, it's a quite onerous process, especially considering the permit in 1900 is only valid for 1 year. So now we're looking at doing that. The applicant would have to do that every single year. So CRAC, again, is looking at a more streamlined way to put this equipment on the beach and collect these data on hurricanes. After reviewing several different options on how we could accomplish this, CRAC decided that the best way would be to propose a new general permit specifically for this equipment. Again, the University of Florida is the only applicant to have used this so far, or at least under 1900. But this proposed new permit would be available to any applicant who would choose to meet the conditions in the permit. So it could be another university within North Carolina. It could be NOAA. It could be the state climatological office. It could be a local weather station, frankly. So I'm not going to read verbatim all of the rule language to you. You have that in your packets, and I think that would get tedious. But I am going to cover the important items that I think you need to be aware of and are needed for discussion for your decision making. So first, the definition of the structure itself. Of the development. The development is a structure. It's temporary. The location is on the beach, and the purpose of it is data for approaching storms and hurricanes. So as we all are aware, oceanfront development requires setbacks in our rules. So this rule language specifically allows the development to occur on the beach and not be impinged upon by the setback requirements. And not only does it allow it, but we actually require it in this language. We do not want this equipment in the dunes, damaging vegetation, and things like that. So applicant, typically for most of our general permits as an agency, in the CAMA rules, bulkhead, seawalls, a landowner is applying for the development. In this case, because of the nature of the development being this research related, we have language in here which would allow someone besides the landowner to be the applicant, aka the research institution who's doing this weather monitoring. Of course, the language still requires the landowner to approve and give permission for it to occur. And the language that we used is not new language to you or to the law. We simply took existing words from the dredge and fill law, which accommodate non-landowner permit applicants, and took that and put it directly into this general permit. So it's something that we already are utilizing. And then lastly, the big kicker, what I mentioned earlier, was this permit language removes the requirement for notification of adjacent property owners. Now that may sound a little alarming, but I want to go to CAMA itself, to the section that talks about general permits in the law, and point out 2 particular clauses there. Letter B actually states that when the commission establishes general permits, you do not have to require mandatory notice. And when it says notice, it's referring to what we typically use for major permits, which would be posting notice in a newspaper and posting a sign on the site. So that's not required for general permits by the law. The next clause that says, however, as a commission, you may, if you choose to, impose your own reasonable notice provisions. And up to this point, as a commission, you have done so in 07J 0204B. You have established requirements for an adjacent riparian property owner notification form and that process. However, in this case, what we're proposing is that you would exercise your option under letter A to not require notice for this particular permit in specifically. Of course, on the beach, endangered species or threatened species are a concern. The language in the permit specifies that what it specifies is that the WRC would participate in the site visit, which standard site visit we do before all permit applications are granted as a division. And then it also establishes some additional coordination with the standard sea turtle window in the summertime, and then also inland hazard areas because that's where shorebird nesting occurs. I want to emphasize here, though, that this is pretty standard boilerplate language for the Wildlife Resources Commission concerns. We have not, this is a preliminary presenting to you this information. We have not had a detailed coordination with WRC about these particular requirements. And I frankly think that if there's any section of this permit that may be tweaked during the rulemaking process, during public hearing, during feedback from other agencies, this might be changed a little bit. And the reason for that is that, again, you remember that I said that the last permit we wrote, there's 18 sites that were written and proposed on one permit. So, that's, again, Wildlife Resources Commission may not want to do a individual site visit with their staff at every single site. Additionally, when you consider that the evacuation order could be in effect before a hurricane, again, they may not have the resources, the capacity to actually be there for the site visit. So what potentially could happen, and you could choose to actually direct this right now when you vote, or we could let it work out with our coordination with Wildlife Resources. But where the rule says that Wildlife Resources Commission will be present for a site visit, we actually could change that to state that simply the site will be reviewed and authorized by the division in consultation with Wildlife Resources. So we could simplify and broaden it there. And then instead of specifying the dates and the inland hazard areas, we could change that, again, open it up some, and simply state that any site or location shall be approved in advance by the division in coordination with Wildlife Resources. So there's options there, and as a division, we're aware that potentially could be adjusted once we speak to them. General permits typically are valid for anywhere 120 days to a year. This one would be valid for 5 years, just because we don't foresee the impacts to be significant, and we don't foresee that it will be utilized that much. I think we put five applications per year is our estimate in the memo that I wrote to you. Just because the permit's valid for 5 years does not mean the development will be there for 5 years. This is still temporary development, and during that 5-year window, the development would only be in place during that hurricane window, with a little bit of time on the front end and the back end. We said 14 days to provide enough time for installation, data collection, and removal. And DCM will be notified when installation occurs, and then we can track that 14 days to know when it's time for the installation to be removed, again, during that 5-year window. Lastly, for this is the equipment and the development is pretty significant in size. So we fully expect, we know how they operate University of Florida, NCC grant. Trucks, skid steers, bobcats, equipment that would be required to move this onto the beach, transport it. Certainly, we don't want any vehicles driving around in the dunes, so the access is restricted to existing vehicle entry points that municipalities already maintain for beach driving. And you can see, if you look at some of the permits that we've written for these, that's the locations that have been approved have all been close by to beach access sites for driving. Okay, I'm going to switch over now, and I'm going to leave the general permit and talk about 0309. So generally, our rules require setback requirements in the ocean hazard area. And then this rule that we have, 0309A, names those exceptions on a list. So we're proposing 3 changes to 07H, 0309 to ensure consistency between that rule and this general permit that we're proposing. And the first is simply housekeeping that we noticed when we were going through this process. Exception number 7 says temporary amusement stands, according to 07H 1900. 07H 1900 is for any temporary structure. So we recommend that instead of calling out amusement stands in particular in this rule language, we just simply say temporary structures. All right, next would be to add temporary weather monitoring structures as the 11th exception in the setback. Right now there's 10. We'd be proposing this would be the 11th. And then lastly, this next paragraph states that the exceptions, while they are allowed in the setback, they must still be landward of the vegetation line. That actually doesn't make a lot of sense entirely. Certainly for this has to be on the beach. This has to be waterward of the vegetation line. But also, if you notice that we, up in the exceptions, it also calls out sand fences and beach access ways. And those typically also will be waterward, extend some waterward of the vegetation line. So instead of the language as it stands right now, and instead of calling out each individual item that may go waterward of the vegetation line, we're proposing something generic which covers those if they're already mentioned in another rule. Okay, so here's a transition. Get away from the rule language itself, and we're going to go back to statutes and talk about just what, it's been a while, I believe, since this commission has created a new general permit. So talk about what the law and your existing rules guidance that's provided by those for this process. So as per general statute, of course, you do have the authority to create a new general permit, and the language in the statute says that the commission shall consider size, impact, frequency, oversight, and the need for public review. With the understanding that each of those would be minor enough that a blanket permit would be warranted for the type of development that's being discussed. I already went over letters B and letter C in the general statute, which refer to requirements for notice and notification of neighbors. There also is a letter D and a letter E in the statute. Letter D states processes for variances, appeals, enforcement. There's nothing new there. And then also letter E. Letter E is a specific prescription from the General Assembly that riprap be allowed as a shoreline hardening material by general permit. So a very specific item there. So moving on to your rules themselves, based upon that statute, in your rules, 07J 1100 provides some additional information about creating your general permits. It states, well, first of all, it restates those 5 criteria we mentioned from the statute. And then next, it states that the developments should have insignificant impacts on AECs to the point that it does not require public review and comment. That public review and comment is for establishing a new general permit. It's not necessarily referring to individual permit applications. The next key thing to bring out from the rules is categories of development. The rules state that general permit activities should be substantially similar in nature within one permit type, and that they only should have minimal adverse impacts both separately and cumulatively. These remaining 5 line items from the rule language they contain some very standard requirements, none of which should cause any concern to you today. So if CRC approves to continue the rulemaking process today, this is a possible timeline that could be in effect. Again, approval would not mean you're approving the rule language exactly as it stands right now in my memo. It just simply means that we're approving it to continue on to the next step of rulemaking. And certainly, again, during this time, those considerations that I mentioned about Wildlife Resources Commission could be tweaked and integrated. But the next step would be coming back to you with a fiscal analysis at your August meeting, followed by a public hearing this fall, and then adoption of the rule itself at your November meeting, and then with Rules Review Commission and that process, looking at a potential permit going effective probably in early 2027. It's also important to note that when we were creating this and talking to CRAC, there actually were a few different types of development or research-related development that we looked at, and we decided simply to narrow this permit down just to the weather monitoring structures to get this accomplished for this particular task. However, we are open to, both staff and CRAC are open to looking at how this permit, after this particular language is in effect, how it might be tweaked in the future to incorporate other forms of development that are research related. I don't know what that would look like. That it may or may not be feasible, but it's something that we would be open to considering in the future after this particular language is taken care of. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll just open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. Jordan?
I have a few questions, and I appreciate all your efforts you put into this because I know it's been talked about for some time now, and it's just kind of been pushed around. But you had said 18 sites, is that right?
Yeah, correct. And then we haven't seen this in writing, but the word on the street from talking to the applicant is that next year's permit application will probably be 21 sites.
But then you said something about 5 that you only expected it.
Oh, 5 applications.
Okay.
So this particular permit from University of Florida has 21 sites. If this were to be authorized, and then and we were to go through using 2,800 instead of 1,900, we would predict that up to about 5 applications per year would be what we would see. So other entities, not just University of Florida, but potentially other universities. Again, potentially a weather station would be all applicants.
Doesn't specify, does it public university or anything? So it could be anyone that wants to just be.
Correct, as long as they follow the rules and conditions of this permit, right? Anybody who follows these rules, I think that we would probably, as an agency, require some sort of verification that they are doing, that they legitimately have the ability to monitor the weather and collect hurricane data. But
that's not in here.
Well, the purpose, it's stated that the purpose is for collecting data in the face of approaching storms. So if they can't demonstrate that they're actually collecting data for approaching storms, I think that we have that language to allow us to not be able to approve that permit.
The structure, I think the only spec I read in here was saying it couldn't be larger than 250 feet. Is that right?
Square feet of an impact on the beach.
It's a pretty big area.
It is. So this one is 10 by 10. Currently, the Sentinel that is used by University of Florida, so it's 100 square feet. We just wanted to provide a little bit of a buffer in case the technology changes over time. So I think I'm not going to do math in public, but I think 15 by 15 is approximately what the 250 would be. So it's slightly larger square footprint, just to allow some extra wiggle room.
So if let's say they wanted to go put one in Buxton before a storm, could they do that?
Well, right now we could permit that under 07H 1900, and then it would also be permittable under 2800.
Even though the beach is very hazardous, doesn't really have much of a dune, any support for. the type of structure?
Well, it would have to be actually on the beach as defined in statute. So if there is no beach because high water is up high enough that you just have high water and dune, then no. But if there is actually defined beach between toe of the dune and between high water, then yes, it would meet that criteria.
And then there's no requirement to notice any adjacent property owners. I think I heard a comment at our last meeting from, might have been Ms. Smith, about wanting some sort of communications with the local governments of these beaches. I think that's something that needs to be looked at if this is pursued. But another question, so under the current rule right now, they have to get a CAMA major? Is that, what's, so you said you gave a permit for 18 sites last year. So why do we need to do a whole new rule if you were able to give them a permit without coming and get a variance?
Because the adjacent riparian property owner notification for that is pretty, it was too onerous. CRAC decided that was too difficult and too onerous of a process. We need to streamline it.
So we're making a whole rule on this because of noticing private property owners of a structure that's going to be put on in front of on a public beach in front of their property in the middle of a storm. Typically when storms come, I pull everything in that's temporary. I don't go and put more stuff out. But anyways, just thought.
We could look at some sort of notification at the municipal level. And frankly, the towns, because the public beach access, the towns are aware of these sites when they go.
There's nothing defined in here too of what the temporary structure would need to be to make sure it's not going to have adverse impacts with a storm, a hurricane coming. I mean, if you put a structure out there that's temporary, I'd hope it's very durable, that it's not going to get torn up.
So the particular structure is, okay.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second, please. Spencer, I think can give more clarification since it came from Spencer to begin with.
Spencer Rogers, I applied for the first permits through Sea Grant and I've been keeping track of the permits since then. All of the installations are proposed on public land. None are to date have been on private land. And they start with permission of the local government to get both use of the beach property that they own, either through a street end or through a public park, and for access of the Bobcat through one of their vehicle accesses. So everything that's in use is on public property. Nothing to date has been on private property. And certainly the first criteria is permission from the property owner.
Yeah, I mean, that's my point is that if it was on private property, it's fine, but this is a public beach. That's where I'm kind of a little confused why we're just wanting to make it easier to go put something on a public beach that's in the middle of a hurricane. It seemed like there could be better coordination of where to put these structures.
We're willing to do whatever needs to take to keep people happy. And the
Good.
problem has been in the past that the adjacent owner approvals expire in 1 year. The permit expires in 1 year. So we have to start over every time. In the 4 or 5 years that we've been doing this, we've never had a deployment in North Carolina. So we're doing this for sites that are potentially useful should a major hurricane track for landfall. It's the only time that University of Florida would deploy. We keep repeating this, and the rental properties and the adjacent owner responses have been extremely difficult to obtain. And we've done it in the past, but keeping it active because of the expiration dates and the repeated permit requirements have been a major challenge for Sea Grant to keep it in place. And again, we've never used it yet. It would be nice if we never ever use it, but we need it in place should a major hurricane threaten.
Okay, Lauren?
Spencer, have these been deployed in other states?
Yes, and we've deployed it at the NC Byway meeting in Emerald Isle in the volleyball court.
How did they fare?
They have learned their lessons over the years and have modified the foundation installation to make it easier to install and easier to remove.
Because I imagine you don't want to lose the equipment either. You don't want to lose the equipment either, right?
No. And it's designed for a couple 100-mile-per-hour winds, 14-foot storm surges, and 10-foot waves.
Sheila?
He answered my question, how durable is the equipment and installation, and how likely is it that any equipment would be lost or blown onto private property?
Steve?
That was my question specifically, Spencer. Have you lost any equipment and has it damaged any adjacent properties over the 5 years?
None.
Bobby?
To Mr. Hensey's questions, at the CRAC, we discussed the issues that you brought up. The reason that we're doing this is, first you start with the premise that the scientific value of this is beneficial to all of us, and especially to us in emergency management and those kind of things. And so we want to allow these to happen. The second thing is, we recognize that to go on private property, you have to have the private property owner's permission. And it's problematic because you don't know where the hurricane's coming till days ahead of there, and then trying to track down the property owner in Maryland or New Jersey or Ohio becomes impossible. And so the rules are set up to do it on these public accesses because you can get to the local government. And so you're doing it on areas that the local government controls. We're not doing it on a private property owner's property. And since you're doing that on the public owned property, then you don't have to have those notice requirements because you're not doing anything to the adjoining property owner, nor are you going on their property, nor are you having a lasting impact. I think there's a 14-day life to when this thing goes in and comes out. Spencer tells me they really aren't even going to be there 14 days, but that's a window that's big enough for exigencies. If you've got evacuations or whatever going on, you can get back in there and get them out. So we went through all of those processes, talked about the notice requirements, talked about where they go, and that's where we came up and what we recommended to you after multiple meetings. And we think that this will work, and we think we've addressed those issues.
Larry?
This is kind of another structures. Do these structures have guide wires or support wires? That seemed like a small footprint if they have guide wires or support wires for these structures, or is just a single?
The guy wires would be harder to anchor than the actual foundation. There are 4 screw pile steel foundation piles at each corner of the 10 by 10.
Right. So you can use a small footprint.
They're embedded enough. And the spar itself is actually basically a carbon fiber sailboat mast.
Okay.
So it's not new technology. It's pretty much off the shelf.
The only other, just to be clear, the way we're going, I mean, there's the research, and this may be more of a rule question, but it's sort of a thought that popped in my mind that if somebody's requesting this permit, that it should be for the public. It shouldn't, because there's a lot of private meteorological companies out there now. It seems to me, and take that information for profit, and it seems like if it's being done for the public information, public good, that the information, it should be a public entity that's going to produce the information and actually utilize it for a public good type of information rather than private entities getting involved on something like
that. I can't speak for Sea Grant since I'm retired, but the only interest they have was in working with the researchers that happen to be from University of Florida
Yeah.
because they build the towers. There are some wind towers on trailers that don't require permits and are put in less water and wave risky locations. And they're installed by several different universities, but they don't require permits.
Jordan?
Can
Bobby, go
Speak
ahead.
to that just quickly. If you're going to go in that direction, rather than using public-private, use nonprofit, because there are universities that are private Duke is a private university and not a public university, but they do research. And so somehow we want to make sure we don't eliminate entities like that from it by accident.
Well, and local news stations would be technically a private enterprise, so.
So,
Thank you.
just a point, so would this open it up to local news stations?
That's the staff.
If you're asking me, my thought would be, why not? If the local news station can gather information that we that have to manage emergencies can then disseminate and helps us make better decisions and helps us communicate with the public better, then that's information that's important. We'd love to have it. So from a local government perspective,
So
that would be good.
just a point that follow. You said this would be at public beach access, or
Publicly owned properties. Basically, the idea was that the towns or the counties have access places or
Right.
places that they own, and those are people that are available during the storm. They're available after evacuation. They're there.
right.
It makes it easy. So those public places, yes.
My question was this. So I mean, I think that answers it. You're not going and putting it in front of private property, or are you?
In the permits that are being prepared for the next batch, this is the 5th permit package that's being prepared. I don't have those notes in front of me, but there are 8 town public accesses, which is just typically a street end.
Right.
I think in Ocean Isle, it may actually be a property that they own with a house on it, but it is publicly owned by the town. There are 2 state parks, Fort Fisher State Recreation Area and Fort Macon. And then there are 10.
That's great. I don't need the whole list. I was just asking are you putting it in front of private or public?
It's entirely on upland property owned by public entity.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you.
In every case, Sea Grant is.
All right. All the questions have been asked and answered. The motion will be needed to start rulemaking on 7H 2800 general permit to allow temporary weather monitoring stations within the Ocean Hazard AEC and amendments to 7H 0309. This is just to start the rulemaking process because we're going to have to go through fiscal analysis and so forth.
I'll make the motion and then just ask that we continue to work with the CRAC and address some comments that were expressed previously.
Your motion needs to be simpler than
Okay,
that.
I will.
Your motion
I'll make a
has to be
comment
simpler.
and then I'll make a motion. Comment is that in regards to working with towns on trying to coordinate where these structures might be put up at in advance of a storm. But I make a motion to start rulemaking, not necessarily to approve the language, but to start rulemaking and then to further work with CRAC.
CRAC's always involved, so
Okay.
that's going to be a given. So
Okay.
the motion it should be to start the rulemaking process.
That's
Is there a
motion to
second?
start the rulemaking process.
Mr. King, any further questions? Not, all in favor? All opposed? It is carried. Thank you for your presentation, and Jonathan, I know you'll continue to work with all the different agencies as to the language as we move forward. Thank you. Ken? After Ken's presentation, we'll take a 10-minute break.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and members of the commission. Presentation up. This is not going to be a brief presentation. Do we need a break?
We'll take a 10-minute break now then. I was thinking about that already.
Oh, yeah.
This meeting will now come back to order. Thank you, Ken, for the heads up. After I thought about it. Yes, thank you. So the floor is
You're very
now
welcome.
yours.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Again, for the record, my name is Ken Richardson, Shoreline Management Specialist with the division in the Moorhead City office. So starting last August, the chair of your science panel on coastal hazards, Dr. Laura Moore, presented the updated inlet hazard area boundaries and the methodology that they use to delineate those boundaries. And then I followed up with erosion rates for the inlets and the ocean front. And then more recently, the commission and the CRAC have had more discussions on what the rule amendments might look like in moving forward with updating the boundaries and the erosion rates. So because the ocean hazard area AECs and erosion rates do require at least a minimum set of rule amendments, and specifically they will occur this time in 15A NC AEC 07H 0304, which defines your AECs within the ocean hazard area system. And then in 07H 0310, which defines your use standards in inlet hazard areas. And so I'll start with those proposed amendments and what they look like. And then I'll just do a brief summary of the IHA boundaries and erosion rates. I won't go through all the information you've seen in the past, just try to do a very summarized version of that. I'm controlling a couple of different things. All right, so the first rule amendment occurs in 07H 0304. Again, these are your AECs within the ocean hazard area system. And since 1979, when the commission has updated oceanfront erosion rates, the rule amendment occurs here. And simply what you're doing is you're referring to the most current erosion rate report in maps. And again, you may recall from past presentations that the OEA doesn't come with boundary maps because the boundary is measured from a dynamic feature, the vegetation line, so it could change. Where it is today may not be there tomorrow. So you have to do the math in the field to find that landward boundary, and it's just 90 times the erosion rate. So the boundary just refers to the updated report. So this is probably the all right, I'm going to pause there just so you can see that. I'm trying to remind myself that I've got a couple of buttons to click when I do this. And so again, just referring to the updated report. And this is one in 0304. The next amendment is in 03042, and this defines your inlet hazard areas. A little bit more change here. Currently, this refers to the 1978 report. And so to update the IHA boundaries, we refer to the science panel's recent report. And as you go down, you'll see that A, B, and C are stricken through. And A and B, staff has proposed taking that out because that kind of references the closure of Mad Inlet IHA. And since that IHA is no longer in existence, that language is not needed. Mad Inlet, just for your reference, is just to our south over at separated Bird Island and Sunset Beach. And then because there are boundaries and erosion rates associated with the IHA, it's going to reference two reports. The top part references the science panel's report, and down at the bottom, that references the erosion rate report in the IHAs. And so I mentioned A, B, and C are stricken through. C still is in there, but it's just in between. All right. C is still in there. It's just there's a little gap in the yellow highlight. And what that does is it excludes State Port Inlet Management Area AECs from being an IHA also. So when that was put in there, that was to try to prevent overlapping AECs. So your State Port Inlet Management areas are at Cape Fear and Beaufort Inlet. So that remains. And like the ocean erodible area, the minimum setback or erosion rate is 2. That's just carried forward in IHAs, and so that's at the bottom. It's also included. So the minimum erosion rate, so if you've got an accretion cycle, that still the minimum is going to be 2 for a minimum setback of 60. All right, since we're in 0304, we're going to move to section 3, and that pertains to unvegetated beach AECs. Currently, there are 3 that the commission has designated on North Carolina. 2 of them are on Topsail Island, 1 in Surf City, 1 at North Topsail. Those designations were followed Hurricane Florence in 2018 when they lost all vegetation and a few sections of those beaches. And then at Oak Island in 2020 following Hurricane in 2020. And so the vegetation has recovered. So staff is just proposing that just those AECs be taken out since the measurement lines for measuring setbacks are no longer needed. So now we're going to move on to 07H, 0310. And these are your use standards inside of inlet hazard areas. So one of the things that we saw with the Jockeys Ridge AEC is that RRC didn't want to see duplicate definitions of what they were. So we defined what an IHA is in 0304. So in that first strike through, we're just kind of eliminating some of the language that kind of describes what an IHA is. So we're kind of doing some general rulemaking, housekeeping in addition to the amendment. So your first significant change to your use standards in an IHA occur in 0310A1. Currently, that requires setbacks to be based on the adjacent OEA. So here we're going to say that inside an IHA, the erosion rates are based on inlet hazard areas, or based on the inlet erosion rates, and then we refer to the reports or the language in 0304 that references the reports and maps. Also, we're going to, staff is proposing to eliminate the designation of, or the commercial versus residential and non-residential. The erosion hazards doesn't matter to erosion hazard, to erosion, whether it's what the structure is being used for. So staff is just proposing to just call them structures or development and not get specific on what types of development. And currently, the one big difference between an IHA and an OEA, or oceanfront, is your size and density limitations. And that's current rule. That's in 2 and 3, and so that will stay in place. The next amendment kind of gets at some of the work that the subcommittee and CRAC has been recently working on. Currently, sections 4 and 5 will become 6 and 7, so that'll stay in place. But 4 and 5 are intended to kind of hold the line of development and not allow seaward encroachment where you have natural accretion in inlet areas. So as the science panel has tried to emphasize, is that natural accretion is expected to reverse itself at some point. So 4 and 5 try to get at what the subcommittee was trying to accomplish and what was talked about at the last CRAC meeting. In 4, this pertains to new development on lots that are undeveloped. And this is one of the concerns that the CRAC had, or the subcommittee had, was how to hold back property or new development where you have a vegetation line that has really moved seaward, and the setback would allow them to move further closer to the ocean. This tries to accomplish what a development line would look like. And this is currently pulling from your beach management plan rules. So this is not something that's new. It's currently applied if a community has a beach management plan that's been approved by the commission. This same language appears there in 0306. So this is not new verbiage. It's just essentially carried forward over to inlets. Doesn't require a beach management plan to be applied. It just simply requires that new development not go beyond the landward most adjacent neighbor. It defines how you decide where the landward most adjacent neighbor is. And then lastly, on on E, 4E, it says structure is located as far landward on the lot as feasible. If we move to 5, this pertains to replacement of an existing structure. This is current language in your grandfathering rules in 0306. The structure as replaced does not exceed the original footprint or square footage, and that the structure meets the required setback as defined in this rule.
Steve?
Ken, does that include the structures that may be over 5,000 square feet? There's just a couple of them up there that we talked about in the past, Carolina.
That's a great question. And so this kind of gets at if you're a structure that's 5,001 square foot. So if destroyed by fire or Mother Nature, this says the replacement of that structure shall be allowed as long as you don't exceed the existing footprint and size. So I think that was the intent of what the subcommittee was searching
So
for.
specifically, if the building is 5,001 feet, it could be replaced to 5,000.
Replaced at footprint and size, but then there's also the bottom if on 5C, the structure then is also rebuilt as far landward on the lot as possible, but at a minimum, size and footprint are the limiting factors.
As long as they don't exceed what was previously there.
Based on how the rule is proposed. And again, this is pulling from your existing grandfathering. So grandfathering currently applies to IHAs and on the ocean front. So this is kind of, in a way, re-emphasizing what's currently allowed. So that's how I look at this. And so I certainly invite someone who might look at that as something different. I know there's some concern over what if you're a structure that's greater than 2,500 that can't use that small structure exception, and you're kind of, and you're less than 5,000. So there's not technically really any grandfathering specifically for you if you're between 2,500 and 5,000. So if you can't meet a minimum setback, is there a mechanism for replacing a structure that may even be third row, but can't meet the setback should, in the event of a fire? And so I think there's a piece there that we don't really, that the commission's rules don't really have grandfathering for. And so I don't know if that's something that the commission would want to consider. And so when I go through and do the fiscal analysis, that will be something that's addressed. And I'm sure that heavily weighed in during the public hearing part. And so if this is the rule language that the commission approves today, this may not be what the rule language looks like kind of as we go through the process of rulemaking.
This might be a good time to address that, because as it came forward with recommendations was to allow grandfathering of existing structures in case of damage or destruction, was to allow those to be built. So if we allow 5,001 square foot structure to be rebuilt or 2,500 square foot, why wouldn't we allow in between? I mean, I think it was the commission's desire to allow that to happen. Robert?
I think clarify this a little better, Mike. Clarify. If you got a 5,002 square foot building, 2,500 1 square foot first floor, 2,500 1 square foot on the second floor, it's destroyed. You cannot go back with a 3,002 footprint on the first floor and a 2,000 square foot footprint on the second floor. Is that correct? You would have to stay footprint to footprint.
Footprint and size is kind of the intent of that rule language. So I guess you could adjust top and bottom, however. But I think as long as you didn't exceed the existing footprint, and we would always refer to county tax office data to get that footprint and the size.
So is the commission comfortable with addressing that gap in between as grandfathered?
And so I do want to point out, though, that we would also have to apply that to the ocean front, because currently your grandfathering rules also do not have that in there. So the last time the commission worked on grandfathering, it's primarily specifically addressing structures that are greater than 5,000 to 10,000 square feet. And that's when you go from 30 times the erosion rate to 60 times. So the grandfathering takes that 60 times out of the factor, and it's 30 times. So that's the benefit of grandfathering.
Is that, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding yes. Is that the general consensus that grandfathering is allowed across what's existing?
Question. Ken, is the grandfathering language as in the rules that we're reviewing right now, the proposed rules, is the grandfathering language more permissive than the grandfathering language that applies in the OEA?
So if you're looking at 5 here, that is taken from the grandfathering with the exclusion of, in 0306, it references not to, for structures less than 10,000 square feet. So that's the piece that's missing. And also, if you're a structure that was built prior to August 2009, grandfathering applies to you. Or if you have a beach management plan, it applies to all your structures. So just right at the starting line, grandfathering may not apply to everyone on the oceanfront. So you have to either have a structure that's built prior to August 2009, or be in a community that has a beach management plan, or essentially be a structure that's between 5,000 and 10,000 square feet, because then you only have to meet 30 times rather than 60 times.
So the rules as proposed give people in the IHA some of the flexibility that people in the OEA have if they have a beach and management plan. Since we've lifted language from the beach and management. Yeah,
Correct. So we're not requiring you, it doesn't factor in when the structure was built, and it doesn't require a community to have a beach management plan. So yes, technically there is some benefit with the IHA if you strictly look at that compared to the OEA.
And I'm not calling that a problem. I'm just saying that I think as a member of the subcommittee, I think we went to some pains to make this as palatable to property owners in the IHA as we could. And certainly I think we extended some flexibility in the IHA. You could question whether we should have, but that's what we did. As you compare it to the ocean related.
Steve, and then
What's magic about the year 2009?
So that's when the graduated setbacks went into effect. So it used to be just a small structure, large structure, and a 2-factor setback calculation. So in 2009 is when the commission went to a graduated setback based on, and there's also a component of structure size. So depending on your structure size, you get an increased factor. So the idea was the larger the structure, the farther setback you would have. So the minimum is if your development is 5,000 square foot or less, then your setback is going to be 30 times whatever the erosion rate setback factor. But then once you get to 5,000 and 10,000, then it's 60. And then the increments increase with size of structure, 65, 70, 75, 80, up to 90.
Which were made in 2009.
Which went into effect in 2009. So if you're a structure that was in existence prior to that date, then you get the benefit of being able to utilize grandfather.
Robert, then Earl. Okay, Earl.
Again, this is probably a bit, but in 5A, you say that the structure does not exceed the original 104 square footage. That tells me that I go back to the 1-story house, I want to go to a 2-story house, that I've got the same footprint. So does square footage matter? I think it does. I think you want to say and instead of or.
Yes.
Thank you, Earl.
So I know some of the concern that was expressed during the subcommittee's discussion is that they didn't want to create a situation where there was more benefit with being in an IHA versus compared to the ocean front. Because still the ocean front, we've seen it at Buxton, they've got high risk too. So it's not just inlets. So the idea was to try to limit the number of impacts inside the IHA relative to the ocean front. So that tried to capture that with the language that you have in existing rules, and then drop that in the view standards and hazard areas. And I can come back to this if we want to kick that around as I go forward. And so I'll go through those maps again that should compare erosion rates, where they're at now and how that changes. And the inlet where we were at yesterday, that's going to be one of the places where you want to see the most significant impact in terms of how erosion rates are applied today versus if we go forward with updated IHA erosion rates. So I'm happy to come back to this. If you want to just think about it a little bit. Okay, that will be all of the rule amendments. So I want to just go back through and just do a quick refresher on the IHAs, where they're at, what the erosion rates look like, and also want to hit the oceanfront too, and just kind of do a quick summary of the changes that that will come with the updated erosion rates, and knowing that we also did a methodology change in the process too. So the inlets that I've got on the map, these are the ones that the science panel analyzed, and these are what I refer to as developed inlets. Your use standards apply to development. So where you don't have development, and think of Cape Lookout at Barden's Inlet, Ocracoke Inlet, Drum Inlet, those inlets were not analyzed, and although there are certainly inlet hazards there, we're not, the science panel is not proposing boundaries at those locations. So there's a few that have IHAs that would drop out just because they weren't analyzed. But specifically, these are the locations where the updated IHAs are located. So as our review, I'll start in the south, down at Tubbs Inlet between Sunset Beach and Ocean Isle. The images that I'm going, or the maps, or the slides that you're seeing, you've seen these before, but I just wanted to kind of refresh everyone's memory on what they look like. So I'm just showing you what the proposed new boundary looks like, but I also want to go through the erosion setback factors to see if we go from what we've done in the past to applying the new inlet erosion rates, how's that going to affect these communities? At Sunset Beach, for the area inside the box at Sunset Beach, it's been 2 since the first study, and it remains at 2 feet per year today. We jump over to the Ocean Isle side of Tubbs, we start to see the impact of using that, or the first impact of using the adjacent OEA rate and applying it inside the inlet hazard area. So at the tip, it's actually, we've got measured erosion, but it occurs over a very short area. And so it was difficult to transition from 2 to 10, kind of do an incremental increase. It's kind of more of a more rapid transition from high erosion to the ocean front.
Ken.
Yes.
Matt, I had a little trouble understanding this display when I was going through the materials. I got to where I did, and I forgot.
Okay.
So when you get over to the left-hand side of the table where you got SBF 10 and SBF 2, could you describe the difference in those again?
Yes. So SBF is setback factor. So if you're citing new development, it's the erosion rate setback factor. Remember, the minimum is 2. So whether it's accreting or eroding at 2 feet or less, or accreting, it's going to be that minimum of 2. And so the table that I've got there represents the area inside that box. So when you're looking at the side of the inlet at Ocean Isle, it starts at 10. If you look at that box, you'll see it does show 10. So inside that area where it's 10, historically it's been 2. And that's because it's been using that adjacent OEA. And you can see that better when we go to where we were at yesterday at Shalot Inlet.
So what that thing on the left-hand side is just showing that there are 2 setback factors within that IHA.
Correct.
So there's 2.
Correct.
And then where the erosion is more pronounced is 10.
Right.
Okay.
And you'll see it's much clearer when we jump on the other side there. It does become a little bit more obvious. All right, so this is where we're at yesterday. We look at what the erosion rates are, and I'm going to throw the table up on the next slide so you can kind of see a comparison of what it is. But one thing I want to point out, and I mentioned it before, with the erosion rates that were calculated this time, those rates were not necessarily influenced by that terminal growing because we've only got one post-nourishment data set in there. So the erosion rates that you're seeing are based predominantly on pre-construction of that terminal growing. And I can say from having done the analyses in the past that we've always seen high erosion rates there, but because we're pulling from that adjacent OEA rate and applying that in the IHA, you get to a certain point, and I'll demonstrate that in the next slide.
Ken, could you go back 1 second? The setback factors on the first two slides, I can't really read them right now. Are they, the two leftmost setback factors are
2 and 4.
2 and 4?
So it
Okay.
starts at 2, 4, and then it starts to increase.
Okay, thank
And
you.
when I throw that table up, you might be able to see that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, because there's a lot of stuff there, I didn't put that on the first slide. So this is a great example showing that applying that adjacent OEA rate inside the IHA, and if you look at that table where I've got the arrow, that represents where the current boundary is. So you can see how it affects the rates as you wrap into the inlet, where it picks up. Now I've identified it kind of where the 10 is in the little yellow box. That's about where the current boundary starts. So if we look at previous studies, the adjacent rate was 5 and 6.5 and 4.5. And so that just gets carried through the inlet. And so it's not that we're picking up higher rates now that we've not seen in the past. It's just that we're not applying that adjacent OEA rate in the IHA. So, and we'll see this again at New River Inlet as well. We jump on the other side of Shalote at Holden Beach. The erosion rate for most of that area, where, at least where there's development, is 2. It's been 2 traditionally. But again, we see as we wrap into the inlet, back on the kind of the marsh side and where the, assuming that's maybe where there was dredged islands, we do pick up higher erosion rates there, but there's no development. But again, if we were applying today's rules to the new boundaries, then all that would be 2 feet per year. We go to Lockwood Folly on Holden Beach. The erosion rates inside that IHA are predominantly 2. Wrap into the inlet, it goes up to 5. But we can see that the rates have jumped around a little bit and have traditionally been high in this area. But one thing we have to consider, and this reflects on the oceanfront too, is the new methodology factors in more nourished shorelines. So that kind of serves to lower the rates if you look at long term, and then you're applying those nourished shorelines to the analysis. At the Oak Island side, all 2 feet per year there. For the most part, it's been 2 feet per year, even with the adjacent OEA rate. That's Lockwood Folly, I'm sorry. Carolina Beach, the rate actually drops. Because here, again, we're only using 1970 data to current, whereas the oceanfront, we're using longer term data. So at Carolina Beach, that serves to lower the rate in the IHA, although the IHA is certainly bigger in size. Masonboro Inlet at Wrightsville Beach. Rate is 2 feet per year inside their IHA. Jump on the other side of Wrightsville at Mason Inlet. The rate is 2, and has been 2, even with the adjacent. Figure 8 side of Mason Inlet at 2 again. Rich Inlet on the other side of figure 8. Transitions from 2 to 3.5 to 5, and in that little pocket, there's been some erosion problems in that area currently too. Topsail Beach, their IHA is 2. That's the one migrating inlet, so they've had the benefit of growing beach. So then we get to New River Inlet at North Topsail. And this is again where, like we saw at Shallotte Inlet on the Ocean Isle side, where that adjacent rate has served to lower the erosion rate applied inside the IHA. But you can see if you look at what truly the inlet is doing, you know, we start at 2, and as we move closer to the inlet, it increases up to 10 feet per year. And then the last side was Emerald Isle at Bogue Inlet, 2 feet per year. All right, and so in many cases, the IHAs do increase, but instead of giving you just a landmass size, like I think 2018, 2019, I did that just to give you an idea, and this is you've seen these numbers before. It's did a structure count to show you how much, even with the increase in size, we do have some decreases in size at some locations. So currently we have 783 structures inside the current IHA, 866 in the updated IHA boundary. So it'd be a net gain of 83 structures total. So if new boundaries went into effect today, it'd be 866, or a total, an increase of 83 structures overall, increasing inside the IHA, but a total of 866. Jump on the oceanfront. Statewide average, just under, right at 2 feet per year. In terms of measured erosion, 218 miles. The average, if you're looking at just erosion portions of the state shoreline, the average was 4.2 feet per year, maxed out at 230 feet. And that's usually around, thinking of Drum Inlet, get around the Capes. Things change real quick there, so that's not surprising. If we look at accretion, 99 miles of the state's oceanfront shoreline was accreting at an average rate of 3.1. Again, this is factoring in beach nourishment. Now, if we just focus on developed shoreline, the rules pertain to development. Of the 317-ish miles of oceanfront shoreline, approximately 46% of that is considered developed. So with the oceanfront update, 124 miles, 86% of the shoreline, there's not going to see a rate change at all. It's going to stay consistent with what they currently have. 17.7 miles, we'll see a decrease in the erosion setback factor. And then 2 miles or 2%, we'll see an increase that ranges from 0.5 feet to 3.5 feet per year. And just to kind of refresh memories too, how does this study compare to past studies? You can see in this table on the top row, we have the miles of shoreline that were analyzed. And that doesn't mean that that's just how much oceanfront shoreline we have. That distance can change of how much, based on how much shoreline was analyzed. So as we get around capes and inlets, that can fluctuate greatly. And those early studies did not include all of North Carolina's shoreline, so those numbers are a little bit lower, not really relative to that 300 range that you're seeing. This table has been carried forward with the past studies that kind of lump shoreline length and erosion setback factor in there, just so you can see where it falls out in relation. So setback factor equal to 2. You can look at the currently 193.7 miles, 61%. If you look to the right, you can compare that to where things fell out in past studies, if that's something that you're interested in seeing. So when we've gone from one erosion rate to an updated erosion rate, you can compare and see where this also falls out. Going from today's erosion rates to the updated erosion rates, we would see 86% would see no change in their erosion setback factor. 1.4 or 2 miles would see an increase, and then 17.7 miles would actually see a decrease. And again, I think some of that changes if you compare it to the past, where you see we've got 2 miles or 1.4 mile or 1.4% will see a increase, if you compare that to past studies, it's actually really low. And I think that's because we're pulling in those nourished shorelines and factoring that into the analysis. But again, even though we're not using post-storm shorelines, we do still capture influences caused by major storms. But I think nourishment is serving to kind of lower those rates if we compare it to past studies. So if the commission approved today, this is kind of just giving you a flow of what the rulemaking process would look like. And what this would do, if the commission approves, this is simply starting the rulemaking process. The next step would be a fiscal analysis. And I know there's a lot of folks that have lots of questions about what that's going to look like. And so following this meeting, that would be something that I would work on. That requires approval from the Department of Environmental Quality and also the Office of State Budget Management. And when the Office of State OSBM gets it, they're not just reading it and then giving it back to us or either saying yes or no. They're truly giving us guidance and feedback on maybe where we missed some marks at on that and offering suggestions. So it's kind of so we've got a good working relationship with those OSBM to help us try to do our best with creating that fiscal analysis. So once DEQ and OSBM approve, then it comes back to the commission for approval. And so I'm anticipating August potentially for that. And then if approved in August, the fiscal is approved then that would start the public hearing and public comment. That would get scheduled after that. And so because, like a lot of your rules, only when you do an amendment, only require one public hearing, because we're doing AEC boundary changes, we have to do a public hearing in each of the counties where there's an affected change. So at a minimum, we'd have to do 7. And then all the public comments would come back to the commission in November. And then the commission would have time to consider feedback from the public and stakeholders and how to move forward then. So if there's no changes to any rule amendments, then that next step would be the Rules Review Commission. And without any other barriers, we're looking at the 1st of 2027. But if there's any changes in this process in terms of if it comes back to November of next year and the commission opts to change the rules a little bit more, then it could potentially start that cycle over again. So it'd be good to have the rule amendments pretty much set before we get to that November mark, unless something just surfaces in that meantime that is certainly worth considering. And it could be the fiscal analysis may be that thing that triggers it when we need to maybe think about how we approach the rule amendments being proposed.
Questions for Ken? Larry?
Ken, when the first thing that popped in my mind was that last table you had. Could you share that with the New York Times and Washington Post when they're showing all of our houses falling in the water? Because that's not a bad state of the health of the coast.
It's not, but it's kind of, it really does depend on, a lot of this does depend on beaches being nourished.
Yeah. And which leads into my second question. Actually, I got 3. But the second part was you talked about, impacts of renourishment, groins, plus, minus, whatever. Do you also look at those different inlets, the ones that have been dredged, relocated, like Rich's Inlet, Vogue Inlet? That has a dramatic impact on erosion rates around these inlets if it's managed and controlled. Do you kind of keep up with that also, with those areas that have been, especially inlets that have been dredged versus those that are not?
Well, we don't, because the analysis, what we're thinking is this. You've got all these different influences, just like when we were out yesterday. The inlets are very dynamic. You've got a lot of factors. It's not just the terminal groin that's influencing that shoreline. You've got whether you've had storms, whether they've dredged the inlet, lots of things going on there. So we don't get at trying to pick apart maybe what's causing one specific thing, but we do acknowledge that if a community's had nourishment, I think I tried to capture that in the report, to try to acknowledge that the beach has been nourished X number of times, or they've got a terminal groin to try to do erosion control, And just to kind of recognize or point out the fact that there's things influencing that shoreline. It's not just Mother Nature.
Yep.
So, but just to point it out in there, so we don't do anything in the running the numbers. Say, well, it's been nourished so many times, or so much volume of sand's been put on the beach. There's not a different calculation for that. It's just where the shoreline is based on all the influences that have put that shoreline where it was, and then just do the analysis that way. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I appreciated you putting the history in our packets. It was quite exhaustive. But we're getting better at it, I think. But from where we started, I forgot, what'd you say, 212 pages or something like that here? But it's a good resource that you put all that in there. And the talking about trying to get the rules correct, Commissioner Smith's suggestion about that and/or, I think that's a crucial thing to get that clarified.
Right, and
That
again,
square footage.
It does. And so right now, the only thing that you can't do on the oceanfront, or that you can't, the difference between the IHA and the OEA is that density and size cap. Everything else, grandfathering, small structure exception, all that stuff already applies. So the language that was presented is pulling from that to try to keep, with the intent of just trying to hold the line. And so thinking about how to, going back to the company earlier when we were talking about the structures that are greater than 2,500 but less than 5,000, is there something there? If something is identified, then that would also then have to be probably applied to the ocean. So that's
like
the one.
the more consistent way that rule is going. To me, trying to differentiate between that seems a little ridiculous. Makes it more complicated than it really needs to be.
Other questions? If not, is the commission, excuse me, Commissioner King.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I extend this discussion a little bit.
No worries.
Kind of a philosophical question. When I read the mission vision for CRC, the word sustainable keeps popping up every time, every paragraph is used. And the sustainability, I guess, applies to man, to economy, and other critters, whatever else. When I hear the term living shoreline, I get confused. And I'm a Midwestern landlord. So can you help me understand what a living shoreline is to us and a living shoreline is to Mother Nature?
You know, I've heard of living shorelines, there's a pile of rocks at the waterline. But, you know, the idea is that you're allowing Mother Nature to try to interact with the shoreline a little bit more. So, you know, that doesn't necessarily pertain to the oceanfront. That's not something that would work on the oceanfront. But you're trying to mitigate erosion, but also while allowing.
It would apply to sounds though, too.
Right. So you can, in an IHA, you can, where you've got an estuarine shoreline, you can apply those living shorelines to try to mitigate some erosion. I think Commissioner Baldwin, I'm not sure if it was you that asked the last time, how many structures are on the landward side of the IHA?
Oh, yeah.
It's a rough, out of the 25 structures is what I came.
Small.
Just roughly. But so what you can do on an estuarine shoreline, you can still do that in an IHA if it's an estuarine shoreline.
This time, a motion would be to consider approval of amendments to 7H0304 and 0310, science panel's recommended inlet hazard area boundary updates and erosion rates and setback reports and maps for IHAs and OEAs in order to move forward with rulemaking.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make that motion, take into account the edit in 0310 5A, the language of and instead of or.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion made, seconded. Further discussion? If not, all in favor?
I have a
Excuse me, Bob.
The implications of changing that language, could we talk about that? I heard that would make it inconsistent with the OAA language, or did I misunderstand that?
Let me pull the, that's a great question. Let me pull that back up.
Is that four, it was in 4A, wasn't it?
So, yeah,
5A.
starting in 5,
5A.
at 5A, B, and C, that's pulled from your existing grandfathering. Your current grandfathering applies to those structures built prior to the August date of 2009, or you're in a community with beach management plan that's been approved by the commission. So technically, if you see that here, this is applying whether you were built pre or post 2009, or whether you're in a community with an approved beach management plan. So if you wanted to find, I don't know that I'd call it a benefit, but something that's different than the oceanfront based on how that is, with that language there, you're excluding the when the structure was built requirement or beach management plan requirement.
My question is, if we change or to and in these rules that apply to the IHA, does that make that grandfathering different from the OEA? Which I believe says or.
Yeah, so if we, if we do change the and and or to and, then you have to do footprint and size in an IHA. That currently applies to the ocean erodible area. I probably need to look at that just to see if that and or is in the current 0306 as well.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Do we create an inconsistency by changing that word?
I would verify that is consistent. I believe I just copy pasted, but I could be wrong.
So 0306 says
or.
Yeah, but like Jonathan, not doing math in public, this is doing English in public. So the and the or, the practical difference between using and versus or, in this case, you're not exceeding this footprint or the square footage. That means you can't exceed either one. If you say and, I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference, but you could be wrong.
That was my question. What's the intent? Can you clarify your point that you?
Okay, yeah, the point was the rule language here says or.
Earl, come up just a little bit closer to your mic,
Yeah,
please.
the,
Thank
the
you.
rule language says or. Is this big?
Right.
And that means that if I go back with a house that's the same footprint, I can build a second floor on it and still meet the rule. Okay? But if it says and, then I can't do that. I have to build a smaller footprint to go up 2 stories. Okay, and that might be beneficial because that smaller footprint might be easier to relocate on the lot and get it away from the area that's in danger. So maybe we want to look at the whole concept of what we're doing there to encourage them to go to a smaller footprint, allow them to keep the same square footage and get out of harm's way.
Robert?
I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but in that comment, there are plenty of ocean lots that have plenty of size to them. And as generations change, you might have a 2,502 square foot house, 2-story, that has worked for 40 years, and we get into this situation, and the person now that wants to replace 5,002 square feet might find that a different footprint meets the needs of them, their family, or whatever, not fighting any other restrictions. Are we restricting the landowner in a negative way? Because there are, think about it, it's family. With a huge story, a 2-story house for years, now they're at an age that a larger footprint, but still the same square footage, make more sense. I don't know the answer, I'm just looking at,
Are you talking about replacing, or are you talking about building back after a catastrophe?
Or both.
I would think you would be talking about both.
Okay, just clarifying.
So I was asked a question, when you say replacement, that could be subjective. I could go in with a bulldozer, tear my house down, and that's considered replacement. Or I could go down and bulldoze it down, wait a year, then I've got, is that new construction now? So at what point is it distinguished between replacement and new construction? So I could see an argument there, but this is oceanfront. Current rules that.
What's the current rule? What is allowed?
That's it. So I guess you could potentially, but you have to think too that the reason why this is here is because there's potentially issues with meeting setback anyway. And so this was designed to offer some relief. So if you think about your beach management plan rules, and the idea was to try to essentially treat IHAs as an area as if it had been nourished, even though the man didn't nourish it, Mother Nature did, but it's expected that accretion will go away. But there's some regulatory relief built into this that you can build in an IHA, but we're trying to hold that line of development. If it's an existing structure, the way I'm looking at this is that there's maybe a potential issue with meeting setback, but you can meet the, let me backtrack. I'm trying to do mental math, like Jonathan said. I hate to do this in front of the commission, but
I would think OR gives you more flexibility.
it does. And again, the goal is to hold the line. So if you've got vacant lots or if you're replacing the structure, you can replace it up to 5,000 square feet,
But can you do a revitalization project? Pretty much tear it down, build a new one.
So right, great question.
Can you do that?
So regulatory, I mean, I would kind of look at that as that's
If you hit the
new
setback,
development.
yeah.
New development.
Madam Chair,
Who was your seconder?
Yeah.
Commissioner Baldwin.
Would you
do
withdraw
you
your-
mind if I amend my motion?
Withdraw your motion.
Would withdraw my motion?
We have not voted on it yet, so.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to accept the rule language as presented to move forward with the next step.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
Because, just to clarify, because it provides more flexibility currently than if we limit it to and.
And for consistency with.
Consistency. Okay.
I'll re-second my second motion.
Okay, motion's been made. The first motion was withdrawn. Second motion is on the floor, with the same motioner and seconder. Any,
And can you restate the motion for me, just so it's just to approve the rules as presented?
As
So
presented
they
to
can
move forward to the
Okay.
next step in the rulemaking
So I
process.
just want to make sure I was clear. Thank you.
all in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, Ken. There's been a
You're
lot
very
of hard.
welcome. Again, this will just start me on the fiscal analysis, and I know Ocean Isle's got some concerns, and I'll work with the town to make sure I capture their concerns as I go forward with that.
Just a comment too, if I can. I was just looking at the analysis on how many structures that were added and withdrawn, but it seems like this area, Ocean Isle's got a substantial, much more. So if there could be more efforts to try to work with this area, I think is ideal.
And public comment will come forward as we go through public hearings too, and all that has to be incorporated back into our final decision.
I just want to make sure that there's 200 homes being added. There's only 83 being added, but 200 of them are in this area. So, or 189, I think, if you took out.
I will work with Mayor Smith in town to make sure I'm capturing concerns that they have, and make sure the commission gets that.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate all the work, and I'd like to thank the subcommittee as well for their work. on this issue as well. Lauren?
So let me be the English major since everybody keeps looking at me.
You won't.
Replace means to put back what was there. Like, but I don't know what the attorneys, I would be interested to hear what an attorney said to that, is replacement versus new construction. Replace means to put back what was there.
I mean, I think we can only bind people to what's in the rules. And depending on how specific you want to be, right? Anytime anyone replaces anything, let's say, take it out of the coastal context, let's say a house fire or whatever, you're never going to get exactly the same, even if it's the same square foot, you know what I mean? Like there's going to be new materials and all that stuff. The rules right now, is my understanding, though I'm still learning as I go, is there's no clear definition as for a time frame for replace versus new construction. And so I understand what you're saying. If you're saying there was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in there, and now there's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, but the configuration of that could be different, the square footage of that could be different. And so, I mean, I think where the commission is going in terms of, I heard you say you wanted to hold the line, and the issue of footprint versus square footage or density. And I think at this point, and you can see what comments you get back from the public hearings and the comments from the financial note, but I think at this point, this is, without overly complicating things, this is probably what the best you're going to do right now.
Anything else?
Did she get an A or a B?
A+.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Rachel, consideration of readoption of 15A NCAC 07B.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Rachel of Adric, and today I'm presenting readoption of the Land Use Planning Rules, 15A NCAC 07B. So a little background, these rules establish the requirements that local governments must follow in developing and adopting a land use plan or a comprehensive plan. And process has been ongoing. I'm just going to go over the timeline really quickly. From August 2024 to August 2025, we undertook the periodic review process. In November of 2025, the CRC approved the proposed rule language and the readoption schedule that initiated the rulemaking process. Then in December 19th of 2025, when the rules were submitted to the codifier, they requested some changes to 15A NCAC 07B.072. And then these are the changes that they requested. Reducing the number of levels in the rule. Some of the rules had 5 levels, and they requested that we reduce levels to 3 levels. So you'll see that there on the left. And then they asked that we update citation or add citations to Environmental Management Commission rules and the Division of Marine Fisheries rules. So those were 2 small changes, and nothing else in the rule has changed. Then in January 15th of 2026, the rule changes with those changes I just mentioned were published in the Register, the NC Register. Between January 15th and March 16th of this year, we had a public comment period. No comments were received. And then on February 25th, 2026, we had a public hearing and no comments were received. So these rules are now eligible for readoption and must be adopted no later than May 1st, 2026 due to the schedule we put to the Rules Review Commission. So today I'm asking for the CRC to readopt the rules, and then we would submit them to the Rules Review Commission for an approval with a potential effective date of July 1st, 2026.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions for Rachel? Not the motion, please.
Just these rules have been approved previously
Correct. These are
by the
merely
Rules
readoptions.
Review Commission. Correct. Were there any changes to these rules since the last RRC approval?
Just those,
Just the ones that were.
those
asked
two
for by the
changes were sent to
codifier.
the Rules Review Commission, and they approved those changes, and then it was published in the register. So no other changes have occurred.
Motion will be needed to readopt subchapter 7B and file it with the RRC.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion been made, second. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Daniel. This is just a presentation about areas of environmental concern and review.
Yes, ma'am. This will be just a simple exercise. So the CAMA requires that you designate by rule areas of environmental concern, and it clarifies that by the AECs must be designated within coastal wetlands, estuarine waters, renewable resources, fragile historical areas, waterways of lands underflowed by tidal waters or navigability, natural hazard areas, key facilities, ORW waters, and primary nursery areas. And also pursuant to General Statute 113A, 115C, requires for you to review your designated AECs at least biannually. And this is what the presentation is, just to go through these. So I'm just going to spell out what AECs we have and a brief description just for your review. To start is the estuarine ocean system. This includes the estuarine waters, the coastal wetlands, the public trust, and the coastal shoreline AECs. Then we have the coastal wetland AECs as identified by field indicators, and this has been done by the field staff in the field. Then we have our estuarine waters AEC. This includes all the Atlantic Ocean waters within North Carolina boundaries, bays, sounds, rivers, and tributaries, seaward of the Division of Coastal and Inland Fishing Waters. We have the Public Trust Waters AEC, which protects the public's rights to public access. It is the boundary from normal high water and requires a site visit or a stamp survey. Then we have our Coastal Shorelines AEC. This is both the estuarine and the public trust shorelines. It requires new development to be located 30 feet from the normal high water line. And this AEC extends 75 feet from normal high water or 575, depending on the water classification. And then to move to the ocean, we have the Ocean Hazard AEC. This includes the Ocean Erodible AEC, the Inlet Hazard AEC, the Unvegetated Beach AEC, and the State Ports Inlet Management AEC. The Ocean Erodible AEC addresses areas susceptible to erosion and extends landward. It extends landward from the vegetation line a distance equal to 90 times the long-term erosion rate, except where the rate is less than 2 feet per year, in which 15A NCAC 7HO207 public trust areas case the setback is 100 feet landward from the vegetation line. The Inlet Hazard AEC is vulnerable to erosion and other impacts due to proximity to inlets. And this boundary extends landward from the mean low water line and encompasses statistically determined inlet migration areas, which you just heard about. And then unvegetated beach AEC are areas that are lacking stable natural vegetation.
Blew the ball.
Save the day. All right, State Ports Inlet AEC is adjacent to Beaufort Inlet and the Cape Fear River to support the ports. We also have our Public Supply AEC, which protects the small surface water supply shed and the public water supply well fields. We also have the Small Surface Water Supply Watershed AEC. This is the fresh pond, which is between Kill Devil Hills and Nags Head, and this basically restricts septic tank locations. And finally, we have the public water supply wells designated Cape Hatteras well field to prevent saltwater intrusion and to ensure water supply protection. And lastly, last slide. Anyhow, the last slide is Jockey's Ridge AEC, which I think y'all have heard a lot about. So I don't think we need a slide for that. And that will conclude my presentation of our AECs.
Thank you, Debbie. Any questions for Daniel? Thank you very much. Cam. Septic tank update.
There's no presentation for me, just simply an update. Morning, Madam Chair. Members of the commission, for the record, my name's Cameron Luck. I'm here to provide an update following the DHHS septic tank stakeholder meeting that was held March 30th. So the meeting was coordinated by Coast Federation, took place in Buxton again, March 30th, with representing attendants from the Home Builders Association, Septic Tank Association, Outer Bank Association of Realtors, National Park Service, Dare County, and several county health departments. Commissioner Hennessy was there as well. Looking forward to hear his thoughts on the meeting. Really quickly, so the meeting was kicked off with an overview by Braxton Davis, who many of you know has been heavily involved in this process and discussion. He brought probably most of the stakeholders visiting up to speed on some of the issues surrounding failed septic tanks on the ocean front. Everyone was also provided with an update and presentation from Superintendent Dave Halleck and his staff regarding their policies and their ongoing struggles and efforts to address both the threatened oceanfront structures and the failed septic tank systems out on the beach. DHHS provided a quick synopsis of their process. It almost mirrored the presentation they gave to you all. Focused a lot on the role within and alongside the local health departments. And there's quite a bit of discussion among health department representatives on how septic tanks are generally permitted, how they're cited, and how septic tanks are enforced and their failures are enforced. DCM staff, this is myself, Director Tancred, and Jonathan Howell attended the meeting. We provided the most recently proposed rule language for discussion. We spent a good amount of time talking through the proposed language and some areas that could be improved. Some of the main points of discussion were focused on defining potentially thresholds for what actually would constitute a repair, or what type of repair would qualify for a permit. In other words, a property owner is required to secure a permit if a filter or a section of pipe needs to be replaced, or will the rule actually need to be more focused on extreme failures? There was also some discussion, sort of fed off some of the discussion we had originally had at the previous commission meeting about whether these changes, the rule changes that are currently proposed, should be applied coast-wide or instead make the rule more targeted to specific situations or locations. I'd say overall the feedback that DCM received at that meeting was positive, and the conversations overall were very constructive. We also did take a walk out on the beach to actually see the systems on the beach in person. I think that was helpful for context. We spent a lot of time looking at presentations, and I know Superintendent Halleck gives a very solid presentation, but getting some of these stakeholders out on the beach to actually see them, I think, was very beneficial. Perhaps key takeaway from that meeting was a clear consensus among those attendees that some form of action is needed to limit the repair of failed septic systems on the ocean beach, and to prevent them from remaining on the beach once they failed. Like I've said in the memo, staff's currently working on those rule language updates. I look forward to getting them over to you all. And I'm curious what Commissioner Hennessy's takeaways were from that meeting, if he has any.
Sure. So I think the consensus was everybody doesn't want to see septic tanks on the beach to there. Wasn't quite clear of a path to do that. When we walked out on the beach, and Director Miller can discuss, some of the maybe foreseen issues with the current draft of a rule, but if there is no vegetation, how do you make a vegetation, how do you go off a vegetation line? And you could be fourth row in and still not be able to get a permit to repair a septic system. And it appeared that the goal, everybody, the home builders, realtors were supportive of trying to get to a consensus. But the current draft is still too broad in that form. It needs to be a little bit more narrowed down.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Cam and Commissioner Hennessy have said. I think we did get pretty consistent feedback from multiple stakeholders that the current draft maybe is a little bit too broad and would benefit from being a little more focused. And there were different ideas for how that could be focused. One would be looking at just geographically different parts of the coast. That would be one way to do it. Another way would be looking at the erosion rates. And the third way might be looking at just, the oceanfront row of houses and not worry about the second, third, fourth rows, et cetera. So we have a number of things that we're working on, looking at different scenarios within the office. And it was great to have all these stakeholders, and most of them offered to help stay engaged and stay involved in the rulemaking process. They want to stay involved in the process. So very beneficial. And I think we'll have something good to present to you guys at the next meeting.
The August meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
August meeting. Larry?
I'd just like the participants, you did a good job bringing all those people together. I'm sure you got a very diverse, different opinions on things, but one of the big things, and that was like at the last CRC meeting, I thought was very beneficial is Department of Health, Human Services, Public Health, realizing the coastal rules. I think there was a lot of miscommunication or not understanding what both agencies are trying to do, and bringing all those groups together, I think will greatly hasten this without it being a lot of fanfare. But that was a good job pulling all that together.
Yeah, I'd want to specifically thank Coastal Federation for helping make that happen. Certainly, I wouldn't want DCM staff to take responsibility for coordinating that, because Coastal Fed certainly put in a lot of effort to make that happen.
Yeah. We appreciate the Coastal Federation's involvement in this process to try to move us all forward. We know we have a problem. We know we need to address it. Thank you, Cam. Sarah.
I will make this quick unless anybody has any questions, because no one wants a lawyer standing between you all and lunch. Just a few. So I've prepared for you a legal update since your February meeting. March was a busy month for writing a lot of orders, mostly the variances that you all approved at your February meeting, but there were also 6 third-party hearing requests that are listed on here. And just a few updates since I originally wrote this. So on the CRC versus RRC case, there were oral arguments before the Court of Appeals. I know some of you watched those. We're waiting for an opinion. We've already talked with staff about how to approach it either way. And then once we see the opinion, we'll determine whether and how to move forward on that. But it could be several months until we have an opinion. There's no definite timeline for when the Court of Appeals has to provide an opinion. On the petition for judicial review on the Mid-Currituck Bridge case, we are anticipating right now that it is not finalized, a court date in late May on that. And then regarding for the third-party hearing requests, I believe all of them were denied except for Frey, which was approved in part. And that one, Ms. Frey or Ms. Fry, I'm not sure how to say it, has already filed before OAH. In that matter, consistent with, pursuant to the order. And so she is pursuing that, but that is all I had, unless any of you have any questions.
It's been busy. That's all I can say. It's been busy. 6 third parties were just a lot, and we're not. It still work. So, thank you, Sarah. You're doing a good job. We appreciate it. Just a reminder, Statements of economic interest were due yesterday. For anybody that has not filed, please do so as expeditiously as possible. I hope everybody has filed. Our next meeting will be June 18th. And the reason we're having it is because we requested the science panel to bring us back a report on hardened structures or other items that could be used in areas, the pros and cons. We requested that deadline, so Dr. Moore and her science panel will be prepared to present us those findings for a short partial day meeting in June 18th. The determination of the location has not been made yet. We'll try to be centralized somewhere. Is Wilmington Central? Father.
I guess it would be old business, but having worked on the Inlet Hazard area rulemaking off and on for over 15 years now, and I know that we're on the front end of the rulemaking process. These are just proposed rules, but I find it gratifying that our proposed rules establish science-based inlet hazard area boundaries, especially given the fact that our old boundaries were so out of date. They employ actual erosion rates in the inlet hazard area rather than the erosion rate from the adjacent OEA, which I think served to understate what the actual risk was in the inlet hazard area. And it includes the concept of limiting the ocean creek development and temporarily accreting shorelines within the IHA. I think all those things are really important accomplishments, and I just wanted to thank Ken Richardson for all of his work and his leadership of the science panel and Bobby's leadership of the subcommittee, and just give ourselves a pat on the back for getting this far.
We're moving forward. We're trying to move forward.
Whether it's and or.
Thank you very much for your comments. Staff's done a really good job. The subcommittee kind of drew everybody together and I think brought us back something that could work. The science panel did an amazing job with all their work and we're recognizing their lines. I know we're all still looking at the green line that needs to be noted, that it's there, that it's important. Now that is a final, not a final, but a proposed boundary that hopefully will not come into play anytime soon, but it's there to be referenced that it could. And people need to be aware that building in a fragile environment can be hazardous at times. And we all need to go in it with our eyes wide open, not our eyes wide shut. So, anything else, Jordan?
Yes. So, Mr. Miller, you had mentioned about the upland basins in your report. When that was passed along with the man-made ditches and the coastal regulatory reform bill that the governor signed back in July, when do you think we'll see that come before us for look at rulemaking?
Expect to have that to you in August.
August, okay. What just to clarify, what do you expect to see for us to see in August?
So there'll be changes to the commission's rules, noting the differences in wetland impacts that are allowable, how we measure the internal shorelines, et cetera. So things that within legislation that would play into the rules. As I mentioned before, we are already implementing the law, but the rule changes will come along.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other business to come before us today? Ken?
I just want to add real quickly, I didn't mention it. So all the science panel reports, the erosion rate reports, the data are on the division's website. You can go to the interactive map viewer and view those boundaries, all the vegetation lines, the shorelines, and download that information from there if you need to, or view the AECs that are mapped that Daniel spoke of earlier. So you can hit our website and find that information.
Thank you. I encourage everyone to go look at the websites. All the citizens that are impacted, all the local government communities, everybody needs to go take a look at it. Okay. Anything else? If not, no further business. We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.